Hey, this is Seth Farnell, the minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 144 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well. Hope everything is going your way, and we appreciate you being here tonight. Apologies for being a little bit late in getting this started, but hopefully we'll have a good lesson here tonight. The I know at least here down in Jonesboro today was another beautiful day, a great day to be outside, and so I hope that it was good where you are at and where you're watching from, because I always enjoy springtime. I always enjoy being able to get out and the kind of the life that the warmer temperatures bring and all the plants getting to grow and everything. And so it's always a good time for me, and so hope that kind of gives you some energy and gives you some good things to do going out. We always want to give you an invitation if you're someone who is in the Portia area. We're located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. Come visit us at the Portia Church of Christ. Right now we are having classes on Sunday morning and Wednesday night. Where we have our classes we're studying Matthew on Wednesday, and it's been pretty good so far. We've had a lot of good discussion. I have a lot of good study on the Gospel of Matthew, and we also have a Sunday morning class as well that is taught by Robert Davis. But we meet at 10 o'clock for a class on Sunday morning and 11 o'clock for Sunday morning, and then it's 5 o'clock for Sunday night service, and then Wednesday night service is at 6 o'clock. And so if you're in the area, hopefully you can come see us sometime. We would love to see you and love to talk to you and get to know you. And usually, on the first Sunday, first I think it's first Sunday night of the month, we usually have a fellowship meal. And so if you time it right, you can come see us then. You can get a good meal. But we hope that you're doing well. We appreciate you being here. And also, if you have any suggestions, if you have any questions about what we study, then please feel free to send that our way. We love to hear from you. Love to hear what you have to say, and help it to improve. Help it for us to get better. But as we said, we're going to take a brief look here tonight at a passage in Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, specifically verses 31 down to 37. But it's good to have the Dunlaps here. Hope everything is going good your guys' way. Always appreciate you guys being here. Hope you've had a wonderful day. We've also got Vonda Vollick Garland and her brother Jim is watching. Hope that you are doing good. We appreciate you being here as well. Always good to see you guys here, especially in the comment section. But we appreciate you. But as I said, we're going to be in Mark chapter 7, and we're going to take a look at an interesting scene in which Jesus is going to heal a man in a kind of an unusual way. Jesus is known as a healer. You read throughout the Gospels, you cannot miss the fact that Jesus is a healer. There are several passages that talk about how large crowds come to him, and he heals them. He has compassion on them, and they bring their sick, they bring their injured, they bring their afflicted to him, and he heals them. And there are so many healings that Jesus did that we're not told specific details about. There's many spots in the gospel stories where it says crowds of people came to him, and he healed them. You think about the time in which Jesus healed the mother-in-law of Peter. After that happened, people came to the house, and Jesus healed them as well. And we find other instances of that. And we know that Jesus is indeed a healer, and that's just part of who he is. And he demonstrates that in individual cases that we do have specific details on, in several cases as well. But it's good to have Beth Chapman Foster here as well. Hope you are doing good. Appreciate you being here tonight as well. But this is a But you can probably think of in your own mind, if you're familiar with the New Testament, of several cases in which Jesus healed people. You think of the 10 lepers, in which Jesus healed 10 people who were afflicted with leprosy, without even touching them, without even being near them. He was able to heal them. You think of the woman who had a issue that had afflicted her almost her entire life, and she went and touched the hem of Jesus' garment and was able to be healed, that way. Jesus would heal a blind man, and he would heal, several other, people, throughout his time, which is, like we said, it's a part of who he is. And the account that we have here in Mark is just one of those cases in which Jesus goes out and heals a person. And so let's read what the Bible has to say here in Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 31. Here it says, "Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee in the region of Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment. And they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is to say, be opened. And his ears were opened, and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one, but the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear, and the mute speak." And so, as we see Jesus, as he does, he's traveling. He goes through Tyre, he goes through Sidon, and he comes to the region of Decapolis, and where he encounters this man, and it says that this man must have been someone of importance. It must have been someone who was maybe a little bit notable in the community, because it says that they brought Jesus to this man. This man didn't approach Jesus, but they brought Jesus to this man, and it says that he was deaf and he had a speech impediment as well. And when you see the language that is used here in verse 32, it says that they begged him to lay his hand on him. So these people really cared about this person. He had this condition. He had these problems, and they couldn't fix him. They couldn't help him get over it. But they saw hope in Jesus. They saw hope in what Jesus could do. And so they went and got Jesus. They brought him to this man, and they begged him to lay his hands on him, because they knew they had faith that Jesus could make a difference where they couldn't, which is a good perspective to have. And that's something we'll see here in a little bit more detail just a little bit later. But they brought him to this man, and because they thought that Jesus could make a difference here. And so Jesus he agrees, and he comes to him. But unlike some of the other healings that we have in recorded in the Gospels, this one has some details that are a little bit different. As we said, this is kind of an unusual case of healing that Jesus does, but there's some details that are a little bit different. For one, in starting in verse 33, it says that he took him aside from the crowd privately. Most of the sometimes Jesus would he heal in public. He would heal a person in the sight of everyone. If you remember, one of the traps that the Pharisees and the Sadducees tried to put Jesus in was the fact that they wanted to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. And so they watched him closely, and indeed Jesus did, and because they thought that would be something that they could hang him on. But in the end, Jesus' wisdom was able to put them aside. But he took him aside from the crowd. They begged him to do this, and heals him privately. And as we know, Jesus never faced a situation in which he couldn't heal. He never faced a situation that was too powerful for him to overcome. But again and again, Jesus demonstrates his mastery over the things of this world. and over, the creation of this world. As we know, if you go back to Genesis, if you go back to John chapter 1, we know that Jesus had a part in the creation of this world. And so if he created it, he knew how to fix it. And he certainly does this, in this case as well. But in the kind of the unusual part, of this healing, and then continuing through verse 33, and into, verse 34, it says that he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And then he looked up to heaven, and he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is to be opened. And so Jesus, he puts his hands, on him, and it says that he sighs, deeply, and he says, be opened. As, not really a grand show, not really something that's, overly, dramatic, not something, with a big to do about it, but rather he just says, be opened. And it says that this man immediately, in verse 35, his ears were open and his tongue was released and he spoke, plainly. This wasn't something that happened gradually over a period of time, but as soon as Jesus said, be opened, this man's problems were gone. They were behind him because Jesus had healed him, something he has done, many, many times before. And so, and this was, certainly something that I think his disciples would remember, if they were witness to this. And as we know, they probably were, since Mark, records this. But this was going to be something that would even increase Jesus' popularity even more. In verse 36, it says, Jesus charged them to tell no one, but the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished, beyond measure, saying, he has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. As he said, Jesus was able to do things that were impossible for the normal person, for the best, doctor, for the best nurse of that time. They couldn't do, anything that Jesus, could do, because Jesus was able to heal in a way that no one else, could. And so, what are some things that we can learn, from the story? What are some things that we can get from it, that we can, see in this instance in which Jesus, heals, an individual? One thing that it kind of stands out to me, is they understood the need, for healing. As we know in the first couple of verses, it says that, the people brought Jesus, to this man, and that they begged him, to heal him. They recognize, the need of this man. And when it's a physical, problem, when it's something on the outside, something you can't miss, the fact that this man, couldn't hear, he couldn't speak plainly, that was a problem that was, very well known. You couldn't miss it. But today, sometimes we're faced, with things, that, you can't see as well, on the outside. The state, of a person's soul, the relationship that a person has, with God, whether the fact that they are, a child, whether they are, someone who has been, has experienced your salvation, someone who's been, baptized for the remission of their sins, someone who has looking forward, to that promise that God has given us. That's not so visible, on the outside. And there's many people who are suffering, from that don't realize they have a need, for healing. Don't realize they have a need, for someone to help them and to cure them and to, bring them along. They think that they are well and good. They think that they are, doing just fine, on their own. But, we have to realize, that as Paul spells out, especially in the book of Romans, in Romans 3 and in Romans 6, and in some of the chapters around that mankind has a problem of sin, and the consequences of sin, the end of sin, is death. Sin is a disease that promises nothing but death. And the only cure that we have for it is, Jesus again. Again, he's the source of healing. He's the source of healing to this man who had a physical problem, and he's the source of healing to us who have a spiritual problem, who are dealing with this problem of sin, and we need someone to bring us out of it. And the blood of Jesus is the only thing that is able to do that. But in order to let the power of the blood of Jesus, do its work, we sing that song, there's power in the blood. There's power, wonderful power. In order for that, to be to full effect, we have to first realize the need that we have, for that, and take action on that offer that he has given. Because as we said, many times before, Jesus is not going to, he's not going to heal you, without, your knowledge, or without, your consent, or without, your willingness, to, take action on it. You have to meet him, there. You have to be someone who is obedient to what he has called us, to do. That's we have to realize that we have that need, and that there's nowhere else, to go but to Jesus, for that healing. And because I'm reminded of what James talks about, when he talks about those who are humble, humble yourselves before God. The humble will be exalted, and those who exalt themselves will be humbled. We have to be someone who approaches this as people who are humble, who realize that our own strength, our own, willpower, our own, greatness is not something that is near enough. It doesn't even come close, to being able to heal, this problem, that we have. But Jesus he has what we need, and he has, the very thing that this world cannot provide, and that is, salvation. It's good to see Ted and I here. Hope that you are doing well. I hope that you've had a wonderful day. It's always good to see you around here. But this man, they realized the need that this man had, and Jesus, he met it, because, as he said, he has the power, to heal. Now, you can do a lot of things in order to improve yourself, in order to kind of to be someone who has improved your lifestyle, or make better choices. There's a lot of advice out there on how to improve your habits, self-help things of that sort. There's a lot of things you can do for that, but the thing that Jesus gives, as was the case here in this story, is something that the world is simply cannot provide. And if somebody tells you that something else can provide it, we know that is simply not true. And so Jesus, here he took him aside privately. He put his hands on him, and he said, be opened. And it says that immediately, this man was healed. And even though Jesus charged them to tell no one, he didn't want them to kind of spread this about. It says that they were astonished, beyond measure. And I kind of feel like I would have that reaction, as well. If I had witnessed this, with firsthand, I would be astonished, beyond measure. I would be, wowed. I would be amazed at what this man, could do. And I think that's something that we can still, have that perspective, of Jesus, because there's a lot of ways that you could look, at Jesus. There's a lot of ways that you could, view, the Messiah, the Son of God, and we always want to respect him, for who he is. We want to love him, as our Savior. But I think there is also a way that we can look at him, if that's just in amazement, that's just in wonder, that he would not only be able to do the things that he does, but have the willingness and the determination to see it through. Because Jesus walked this earth for those 33 years. He went through all that he did, knowing that this existence on this earth was going to be, painful. It was going to be, hard to get through. But yet he still did it. He still went through everything. And he did that, for us. And the fact that he's able to, feed 5,000 people, he's able to walk on the water, he's able to heal people that no one else, could heal. That should fill us, with a sense, of wonder and a sense, of amazement, that, we serve someone who is able to do, those things. He can calm the winds and the waves. He can, do all these things that we see him, do in the gospel story. And so I think we should be wowed, at, the God that we serve and the greatness that he is and, the power, that he has. And because, there is, like I said, there's a lot of ways in which we can, look at him, a lot of ways, a lot of perspectives that we can have. And I certainly think that that's one of them that we can't miss, because, I mean, it's easy to forget. You think about the children of Israel, in the Old Testament, how sometimes they would view some great thing that God did, such as the parting of the Red Sea, or, a victory over places such as, Jericho, and where the walls, fell down. Some of the great things that God did for them. But not soon, after that, we find them, forgetting about those great things and forgetting about, what God did for them. And generations after that would go back into sin and start serving, false idols and false gods, and they would pursue, those things. We as Christians living today, we have, the Word of God. We have, the Bible, the Scriptures that were preserved for us, and so we can read, these things that Jesus did, and we can be amazed, by them. We can wonder, at them. We can be astounded, at them, and so we can't, forget about what Jesus has done and what God has done, on our behalf, and how wonderful that is. Because when you think about someone who can create this world with just a spoken word, as we know in the case here with Jesus, all he says is, be opened, and this man was healed. We know in Genesis chapter 1, God says, he just, says the word, let there be light, and this world was formed in the way that it was. Someone who is able to do things in such an incredible manner, and yet they still care for us. They still care, for me. They still care, for you. Someone who lives, in the big picture, in the global picture, of things. I don't mean all that much. I'm not that important, of a person. That's simply, the reality of it. But still, God, the person who was able to do this healing and to do those miracles that we talked about, suffered and went through those things because he cared, for people that are unimportant, for people who are not significant, to the big picture. But yet he cared enough for them to do, those things. And that's a wonderful thing to think of. That's a wonderful thing to that can encourage you, that can kind of build you up. That you're not so insignificant. That God would spend this time here on this earth, to make sure that you have hope, and we do have hope, through Jesus. And so we can be, astonished, beyond measure, just like these people were, at this time, that, we have someone who has our back, and someone who cares for us, even though they are well beyond, what we can do ourselves. Because, as these people also said here in verse 37, he has done all things well. He can even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. And so, whatever we're dealing with, whatever problems we're going through, sometimes we may get the idea that our problems are too big for Jesus, that they're too big to hand over to him, that It's not something that he can take on. And we may not verbalize it in that way, but sometimes we see things in that way. But if God can do things like this, if he can do things that were impossible for the best of the world to do you think he can handle the things that you're going through? I think he can. I think he's someone who nothing is impossible for him. As Jesus would say later on in the scriptures. With man it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And that's a pretty good thing to think about as well. Not only does he care for us, but he has the power and the ability to take us in and to forgive us of our sin. And so even people such as the Apostle Paul, who if you're keeping a scorecard of sin, he probably had the high score going up, but he was able to have his sins washed away. He became one of the greatest evangelists to ever walk this earth. God can change Paul. He can change you, and he can take on those things that we're going through. It doesn't mean we're going to have a painless life. Doesn't mean that we're not going to face trials and tribulations. We know that we're going to. That's the way this world is set up. But we can always look forward to that bright future, because if we know Jesus, we know that we have been healed, and we know that we have life ahead of us. Jesus is the author of life, and he does that because he is a healer and because he is able to do these things. And so these are just a couple of things that encourage me and that make me it can make you smile when you think about what God does and the ability that he has in order to change this world, and the fact that it's open to everyone. There's not exclusive to just a few people or a certain people over there, but anybody can come to Christ, and anybody can have their sins washed away. All you have to do is be obedient to his word, take action, and live out your faith. And that's what we are called to do. And like I said, if we do that, we can be very optimistic. We can have a look with joy, and as they say here, we can be astonished beyond measure at what God has given us and the promise that he holds. And so I hope this is something that has been encouraging, beneficial for y'all tonight. We will be back next week for another edition of the Midweek Bible Study. I hope you can join us then. We're here on Thursday, every Thursday at 7:00. Next Thursday, I believe we will have Chris Hughes will be with us, and I know you're going to enjoy what he has to say, and we'll have a good study for then. But until then, I hope that you have a wonderful night, and I hope things go your way, and look forward to seeing you here next time. But until then, hope you go out and glorify God in everything that you do. We'll see you next time.